this is something that you can keep in mind when you're talking to somebody who's challenging you or the Catholic Church. Just remember that although it's not necessarily the case, it's entirely possible that that's actually a smokescreen for something deeper that's going on. Or somebody who's angry at the church and it is constantly taking pot shots at the church. I've met people like this. I've known people like this. Chances are you have too. And one of the sad realities of human nature is we sometimes find ourselves lashing out because we're trying to cover up something in ourselves. And so be aware that when your coworker or your brother-in-law or somebody is giving you a hard time about X, Y, or Z, there may be a deeper reason involved. Let me tell you a story about that. I was speaking in Florida, and I was at a big conference, so multiple speakers, and I had given my talk, and I was back at my book table signing books and meeting people and such. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye there was this woman, younger woman, probably mid-30s maybe, and she was sort of scowling at me. She stood about 10 or 15 feet off to my left, and every so often as I'm signing books and saying hello to people, I kind of glance up, and she'd still be there, and she was kind of scowling at me. And I realized she was waiting to talk to me. She was waiting until the last person left, but she did not look happy. So when the time came, I smiled at her, and I said hello, and her response to me was, "Don't even try it." What? I said, hello. What do you mean, don't even try it? She says, I know what you do. She says, I know that you're all about trying to get people to become Catholic. She said, well, I'm an ex-Catholic, and I hate the Catholic Church, and there's no way I would ever go back to the Catholic Church. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why are you even here then? And she anticipated that question. She says, I'm only here because my husband, who's a Catholic, he dragged me here, and I don't want to be here. And, you know, I've had it up to here with the Catholic Church. So as she's saying this, and I'm thinking, why is she like singling me out? What's the reason for this conversation? But I noticed I was starting to get angry. It doesn't take much, right? Sometimes you just get in a zone where you just easily get angry. So her pushy, sarcastic, insulting things that she was saying, it was, starting to get steamed. So I said, you said you're an ex-Catholic. What happened? And she said, well, do you really want to know? I said, yeah, sure. So she's telling me, you worship statues and you worship Mary and you think that wafer is really Jesus, and it's not, it's just a piece of bread, and you think you can earn your salvation. And I mean, these are things I've heard 1,000,001 times before over the years. And that too, quite frankly, was starting to get me a little bit irritated. So I'm just waiting at this point now for this woman to stop talking so that I could do a Mexican hat dance on all of her arguments. I was waiting for her to be quiet so that I could refute her. And in that moment, I kid you not, I had this, I don't know what to call it, an intuition, a still small voice. I mean, I don't believe it was God speaking to me. Could have been my guardian angel. But I just, in the moment, I perceived this intuition to just zip it. Just be quiet. Don't respond. Don't say anything. And I'm thinking, but where did that come from? Because that's not my modus operandi. That's not how I typically would operate. So I thought, okay, I'll follow that intuition. And when she was done giving me her diatribe against the Catholic Church, I just didn't say anything. I just sort of stood there. And for a moment, I thought, oh boy, she thinks I don't have an answer, which was a blow to my pride, which could deserve, my pride certainly deserves many blows. And that was a blow that it took because I was thinking, oh, she's going to think I don't have an answer. And I just kept quiet, much against my own desire to speak up on this issue. So she kind of looked at me like, well, aren't you going to say something? And I said, well, you used to be Catholic? And she said, yeah. I said, well, what happened? I said it again, basically. What happened? And she kind of got less angry, and maybe a little bit of the wind came out of her sails now that she got out all of the complaints that she had about the Catholic Church. So she said, well, you really want to know? I said, yeah. We went and sat down at some tables nearby. This was an indoor, kind of a large convention center setting. So it was a place where you could eat lunch and such. And there was nobody really around there for 20, 30 feet away. So we went and sat down at this table, and she put her purse down on the table. She sat across on one side, I sat on the other, and she says, well, here's what happened. She said, I was raised in a very devout Catholic family, and my mom and dad were strict Catholics. She said that a couple of times, that her family was strict in their Catholicism. She said, we went to Mass every Sunday, we prayed the rosary, I went to Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school. And what my parents didn't know, she said, was when I was about 18 years old, I was fooling around with my boyfriend, and I got pregnant. And she paused. She sort of took a deep breath, and she said, and when I found out I was pregnant, I was really terrified because my boyfriend was trying to get me to have an abortion, and my parents, of course, would have flipped out at even the suggestion of that. And so I knew that I couldn't tell them that I was expecting a baby because they would disown me. They would be so ashamed. You know, their super duper Catholic daughter got herself in trouble. That would bring shame to the family. So she says, I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell my brothers and sisters because they would tell my parents. But boyfriend's trying to get me to have an abortion. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. And it was getting urgent because she said she would start showing soon. And she's going to have to do something. So she told me that she went to a Catholic parish a couple towns over where nobody knew her. And without an appointment or anything, she showed up at the parish office and she asked to see the priest. The boyfriend's waiting in the car out at the curb. She's nervous and, you know, an emotional wreck, and she's scared, and she asks to see the priest. And the priest kind of pops out of his office for a minute. Yeah, what's up? What's up? And so she told him, she says, I'm single, I'm pregnant, I don't know what to do, I'm not sure what to do, and I need some help. And the priest's reaction, she told me, was, well, you know, these pregnancy tests are often inaccurate, no big deal, take it again next week, it's probably nothing, and listen, I don't have time, I got stuff I got to do. So he shooed her out of the office and didn't help her, didn't pray with her, didn't refer her, didn't do anything except to let her know that her problem wasn't important to him because he had other stuff that he had to do. So now, as she's telling me this story, she's starting to cry. I'm saying nothing. I'm just sitting there saying nothing, just listening. And she's starting to cry. And she says the only thing she could do at that point was she got in the car and her boyfriend drove her down to the abortion clinic and paid the $300 and she had an abortion. Now at this point, this poor woman who was berating me so furiously 10 minutes earlier, now her head was down on this lunch table and she was sobbing. She couldn't even talk anymore. She was sobbing and her shoulders were heaving. And I think she was trying not to just completely fall apart. And I can imagine she was embarrassed in front of a total stranger, me. So it took her, seemed like at least a minute before she could begin speaking again. She was so overcome with pain. And when she started speaking again, her head was still somewhat lowered, and speaking through her tears, she said, and that's when I began to hate the Catholic Church. She said, because I knew my parents wouldn't help me. They would disown me. That priest didn't help me. And she said, I had no choice but to abort my baby. That's how she felt. She said, I had no choice. I had to abort my baby. And I was so angry and so hurt and so much in pain. And she said there were some friends of mine who suggested that she go with them to their church. And she said, okay, I will. And she started going to their church. She just turned her back on the Catholic Church. And she said, and that priest, she said it several times, she said, that priest, he didn't help me. And what I perceived as I was listening to her story was that the priest personified for her the Catholic Church. He, in his unwillingness to help her, he personified in her mind this Catholic Church that she had been raised with. And so she entered into, by her own explanation, she entered into a time of great hatred of the Catholic Church. And she left with a vengeance and was very anti-Catholic. Now, fast forward, all these years to when she's now talking with me. So that might have been, 18, 20 years had gone by. And so as she's saying all this and she's drying her tears and kind of getting her composure back, and I'm sure she was embarrassed. And what did I do? I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. I said, well, you need to go to confession. And she looked at me as if I had said, here, hold this rattlesnake. She looked at me with a look of contempt and disgust, and she said it. She says, what do you mean go to confession? Didn't you listen to anything I said? I hate the Catholic Church. I would never go back to the Catholic Church. She was shouting again. And she got her purse, she stood up, and she didn't say thanks for nothing, but the look on her face did. And she got up and she walked away. And I was kicking myself. Why did I say that? Of all the things I could have said, why did I say that? Why couldn't I have been more pastoral? Why couldn't I have been more anything but that? Why did I say that? I was very unhappy with myself. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try to put that out of my mind because it was so disappointing to me. And she walked away, and that was it. Well, about 6 weeks went by, and I got an email from her out of the blue. She looked me up. And her opening sentence in this email was, Dear Patrick, you were right. I needed to go to confession. I was flabbergasted. I was jaw on the floor. And so I read her email, and the essence of the email was, when you said that to me after I had shared this deep, dark secret and all the pain that went with it, and when you said that, I need to go to confession, I was so angry and so offended that you would say that. But she said I was so angry and so offended I couldn't stop thinking about it. And the more I thought about it, the more angry I got, and the more angry I got, the more I thought about it. And she said eventually, it got to the point where she thought to herself, maybe this is God telling me I need to come back to the sacrament of confession. But no, that can't be. And she said, finally, she said to the Lord, I mean, if this is really you telling me to do this, I'll do it, but I won't like it. But I'll do it, but I won't like it, but I'll do it. And she did it. She described in her email, in a subsequent one, about how she went to another Catholic parish and she made a good sacramental confession. She got everything out, including the abortion and everything that went with it. And she said the priest in this case was very wise, and he was patient, and he was exactly the person she needed in that moment to help her through that situation. And you know what happened? She came back to the practice of her faith. And I thought I had said the stupidest thing in the world. And in retrospect, I look back on it, and it wasn't me speaking. I think it was the Lord speaking through this dumb ox, through this Balaam's donkey. And he was able to give her the words that she needed to hear in the moment. And it was exactly what she needed to be able to start healing that wound and come back to the practice of her faith. So all of the rigmarole up front, all of the, well, you worship Mary, and the Catholic Church is trying to earn its salvation, all this other stuff, it had nothing to do with the real problem. None of those things were the real problem. And if I hadn't listened, this is my final point, we got to take a break. If I hadn't listened to that intuition in the moment, maybe my guardian angel, I do not know. But if I had ignored that, and if I had started blabbering and picked up my Bible and started doing my Mexican hat dance on her arguments, you know what would have happened? None of the rest of it. Because we never would have sat down. She never would have revealed this issue. The blow up wouldn't have happened, and everything else that took place after that. None of that would have happened. So the only thing that I look back on it and say, man, I'm glad I did that, was I bit my lip and didn't say anything.
For more of The Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.